children were starving, dying. They were literally dying under my hand because there was no food.
Right now we're doing Operation Drop Dead here, and millions are starving in North Korea. Tons are in prisoner camps. We gotta make it known. People don't care here. That's why we gotta do dramatic things like this to get people to pay attention to what's really going on in the world. That there are people only 30 kilometers north of here suffering and dying and starving and imprisoned for no reason. They have no human rights. And no one cares, and no one seems to care. So we have to go to these kind of measures to show people, make people care.
한국 잡힌 것도 사람 치고 안에 있습니다. 지금 막 몸에 그 심한 걸 죽이기까지
A little bit into the background here. North Korea currently has about 23 million people in its country, actually closer to 24 now as of last year. It is a communist totalitarian state, which is weird because it's the only communist dynasty in history where the father has passed it on to the son. And it's essentially, it's not even, I think, a pure communist state. It's essentially a cult. It's a religion based around the founder, Kim Il-sung, who has passed away about 10 years ago, but is still the titular leader of the country. And it's a country that is very different from everything else, I think, in the history of the world. And I'll get into a little bit more about the details there. And Kim Jong-il, as you're all aware, and you're all familiar from Team America World Police, is now the current leader, and he is lonely. This is the Korean War that split the Korean peninsula into two. So the south, you have a prosperous, democratic, capitalist society. And in fact, if you know any Koreans or Korean Americans, we all trace our heritage from the south, at least one generation back. Because if you're from North Korea, you cannot get out. It's just a fact of the matter. And this was Kim Il-sung, of course, the leader of North Korea. Sorry, it's just gratuitous. I should have taken that out. That's Kim Jong-il, the current leader, with Jiang Zemin, the last president of China. This is the border between North and South Korea, the most heavily fortified border in the world. I think Bill Clinton, when he was president, visited the border and said it is the scariest place on earth. There are huge amounts of troop concentrations pointed at each other between South and North Korea. And technically, the two Koreas, as well as the US and these other countries, are still at war. It's only an armistice. It's technically a ceasefire. They are not at peace. In fact, the United States doesn't even recognize North Korea and vice versa as legitimate countries. In the last 10, 15 years, about 2 to 3 million North Koreans died. North Korea went through a series of famines and floods from 94 to 96. But the floods and famines in and of themselves were not the problem. At the time of the floods and famine, North Korea received the most international aid of all the countries in the world, a lot of it from the United States. They had enough food, clearly had enough food to feed its people, but did not. In fact, what they did is, since they got international aid, they said, okay, well, let's not feed the people with what we have to begin with. Let's sell it on the black market. Let's feed the military. Let's do other things with that aid. In fact, there are aid bags from the Red Cross or things like that that say gift of the American people, gift of the Japanese people, gift of the EU, that have shown up on black markets in Russia and China. Also, there have been bags of heroin, which North Korea exports, put into aid bags marked by the Red Cross and used to smuggle out. And so this is a country that clearly does not consider its people as a vested interest. Kim Jong-un has been quoted saying that only 10% of its country has to survive. Only 10% has to survive for it to be considered a successful state. So if you're going with that standard, they're not doing so badly right now. But an estimated 10% of North Korea did perish in the last 10, 15 years. About 13 million of all 24 million people in North Korea are malnourished. It's a medical state that essentially you cannot recover from chronic malnourishment. You cannot. If you're a child from between the ages of maybe 0 and 5, when you're first born, you need to get regular food, regular breast milk nutrition. Otherwise, you will get stunted permanently, physically in terms of your growth, in terms of your height, your weight, and also mentally. You will get mental retardation because you are not able to eat functionally when you're a child. And 13 million of North Korea's population is currently like that. The average ration is 250 grams, which is a minuscule, minuscule amount. And most of the people actually don't even get that ration. The World Food Program supported 6.5 million people in North Korea up until about a year ago when they got kicked out. And then now they brought back in and they feed 1.2 million people, which means, all these statistics basically, what it means is a lot of people are starving in North Korea. 3 times as many people starved in North Korea in the last 10 years than did in the Ethiopian and Somalian famine. And so this is a tremendous crisis that very few people are aware of. And the biggest distinction with this crisis is that it's man-made. It is not a result directly of a huge, a tidal wave or a flood or an earthquake or a natural disaster. It is inherently man-made, and that is why I think it warrants our attention a little bit more. A 7-year-old North Korean child is 105 centimeters metric, and a 7-year-old South Korean child is 125 centimeters. That's the average height between the two countries. Now, these two countries were not separated until about 1950. They were one country for 5,000 years. So they're the same DNA, the same genetic makeup, but that's the height difference on average, just at 7-year-olds. Once you get older, the average height for the North Korean military is around 5 feet solid for the military. And even at the DMZ levels, you can see the major distinctions between South Korean soldiers and American soldiers as opposed to North Korean soldiers. In terms of health, there is no public health infrastructure whatsoever. The hospitals are overrun. There's no electricity going throughout the country. There's a lack of clean water, and there's a huge, huge epidemic crisis with typhoid, scarlet fever, tuberculosis, and diseases like dysentery. Things that, did anyone play Oregon Trail when they were in elementary school? You have died of dysentery. That still happens in North Korea. Weakened immune systems cause deaths from the common cold because your system cannot fight it off. Something we get over with a night's sleep and Dimetapp, or Robitussin if you don't like Dimetapp. It kills people in North Korea. They die from this because there's a weakened immune system because they don't get basic food every day. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, there is stunted growth and severe brain damage in a whole generation of North Korean children. So that is essentially the context, the background of the situation in North Korea, without even getting into the human rights situation. Already, we're starting off from severely malnourished population, no medical care and public health situation, and everybody inherently is born and raised with stunted immune systems and just health in general. This is, on the right, you see there are 2 North Korean refugees. They're aged 21 and 22 years old. On the left, that's myself. So those 2 gentlemen are very, very, very small for their age. In fact, they were joking around. They looked like hobbits, and they were joking around about that. But that's the result of a generation of physical stunting. This is actually in one of our underground shelters back from China, and I'll get into why they end up in China to begin with. If they come back pregnant, they're assumed to be a child of mixed race, of mixed heritage, probably with Chinese blood. And North Korea's official state policy, believe it or not, is of a pure Korean race, where they say, if you are a child of mixed heritage, we will kill you. If a woman comes back pregnant from China, they will forcibly abort the baby. And it's not, in a hospital and sanitary conditions, they use a syringe filled with salt water. And if that doesn't work, they kick the woman's stomach until the baby dies. And if that doesn't work, they wait till the baby is born, put it in a box, and let it die out of exposure. That's the way they do this, on a weekly basis in North Korea. In fact, when Hines Ward, if you're familiar with the Pittsburgh Steelers MVP for the Super Bowl, when he won the Super Bowl, South Korea was fanatical about him. They said, look, he's so great, he's one of our sons, and we're so proud of him. North Korea actually went as far as to issue a public statement that said that they condemn South Korea's love affair with mixed race, and that what did they say? 1 drop of mixed race in the Han River will not dilute 5,000 years of racial purity. The government issued a statement saying this. That's the kind of system we're dealing with. It's unreal. It's something we watch in movies or we see in the History Channel. It's happening right now in 2007.